Hello everyone, you are welcome to Excel Mathematician. Today we are going to continue Excel reference that we started some days ago. So this is the last aspect of Excel reference. So we will be looking at relative, absolute, and mixed reference. Relative, absolute, and mixed reference. Like we know, the beauty of spreadsheets or Excel is the ability to copy sideways, up or down, and then still maintains the correct formula. So if I drag my formula either to the right or to the left, up or down, I should still maintain the integrity of that formula. The formula should still give me the expected answer. So I can copy and paste, I can drag down, and if my Excel is not fitted, I could double click the edge of my formula to fill down to the last row where I want my formula to be. So for integrity of your formula, it is important to know the type of reference you are copying and what you want to achieve. If this is not in place, then there will be a problem. You must be sure of what you want to achieve, and because of that, you must know whether the cell you are to use is relative, absolute, or mixed reference. So no problem with the formula to be maintained in one cell. So if you want to use a formula just in one cell alone, you don't need to know whether it is absolute, relative, or mixed. It doesn't matter, because you are using that formula in just one cell, so you don't need to know anything. However, because in Excel we copy down, we copy sideways, we copy to the left, to the right, then it means we have to very careful. We must know the type of the formula we want to use. So if you have a formula and you are seeing the dollar sign, the presence of dollar sign determines the type of reference you are using. So if, for example, if there is no dollar sign at all, it means it is a relative reference. So if there is a dollar sign before the row or the column, then it has turned to another type of Excel reference. So we have to know that. So the presence of the dollar sign determines the behavior of your formula and the type of cell reference you are using. So it tells us whether the cell is locked or not, or whether it is partially locked or not. So you need to know what to use at what time. So let's move to the first aspect, which is relative reference. What do we call relative reference? Relative reference is our default reference. When you just input any Excel range, what you have inputted is what we call a relative reference. An example of a relative reference is where you have A1, S2, S8. These two types of references, A1, S2, S8, they are called relative reference. So because this relative is without any sign, don't forget that A is for colon while 1 is for row. In this instance, there is no dollar sign before the row or before the column. So if I drag my formula to the right or to the left, up or down, my reference will move to the right in equal measure, For example, if I input my formula in A1, if my formula is equal to A1 and I drag downward, A1 will change to A2. If I drag A1 to the right, A1 will change to B1, because Excel is going to be moving in equal measure from my original formula. So recall that ABC, which the alphabet, they represent columns. If you see 1, 2, 3, any numbers represent rows. So if your alphabet don't have any $sign before it, or your numbers don't have any $sign before it, it means they are relative reference. So if you don't have $sign in your reference, it means that reference is a relative reference, and that is the default reference. Both row and column are moving in the direction of your formula. So we normally use this when we know that our formula should move in the direction of our input cells. Input cells is where we have put our value and we want to manipulate those values. So if I know that I drag down and my inputs are downward and I drag down, Excel will be doing this, will do the correct thing. So both row and columns are not locked, so they are moving, they are free, and none of the two is locked because there is no $sign. Once you don't have $sign, it's not locked. Let's quickly look at an example of relative reference. If you look at this, if you have quantity on column A and you have price, you have quantity in column A rather, and you have your price in column B. Your sales, you want to get sales for each row. So it means here you will enter A3 multiply by B3, and when you press enter, you have 408. So this, I want to do the same thing for the rows below. So I will drag down or I double click. In this instance now, what Excel has done for me, what Excel has used is called relative reference, because I want my formula to move in the direction of my input. My inputs are A3, A4, A5, and on like that. So this is the correct reference I need to use, and that is it's relative reference, because there is no $sign before A, nor any $sign before 3, and on. So this is an example of relative reference. Let's go back and look at absolute reference. What do we call absolute reference? Absolute reference is a situation whereby the row and the column are locked with the use of $sign. So instead of having A1, I will have $sign before A and $sign before 1. So this signifies an absolute reference, because the row, which is A, which is 1, has been locked. The column A has been locked, meaning that if I drag down or I drag sideways, my formula will still be looking at the input that I have kept in cell A1. The same thing, you can have it in your formula where this function where you have $sign D, $sign D, $130, colon, $sign F, $sign 131. If I copy this formula to any place, my Excel will still be looking at the same place. It will not change. So in this instance, I have locked both row and column. We normally use this one for a reference table. When we talk about the table, our table shouldn't move. So we use this type of reference in tables when we are talking about the data set where we want to be looking at. we use what we call absolute reference. And sometimes we might want to be referring to a point in time. That point is called a reference point. If everything be looking at that point, we can use absolute reference, so that when we drag down, our formula will still be looking at that reference point. Again, sometimes when you are working on financial modeling, you have driver cells. The input cells that drive your financial modeling. What you have, that you don't want it to change, so the driver cells where you have put what determines the output of your financial modeling. Once you have it, you might want to ensure that if I copy the formula to another place, it will not move. Then I will use an absolute reference. When you are using absolute reference, you can be thinking of whether you should, instead of, because it's not moving, should I use a value or I should use a cell reference? I will advise that never use a value but a cell reference. So if you want to use a value in your function, let's say in your formula you want to multiply the value in a cell by a constant that you will use throughout your model. Don't input the value of that constant in your formula. Rather, put the value in a cell and then make that cell an absolute reference, so that if you think about it and your constant has changed, you can go there and change the value in that reference. Then everything in your model changes. Instead of you looking for where you have used the value, where you have used constants in your formulas, you can just put it in a cell reference and then make that cell reference an absolute reference. So let's quickly look at an example of that. Example of absolute reference. Let's say you have year-on-year growth rate of 5%. That you want the increase in sale in year 2. You want a sale of year 2 to have increased by 5%, and year 3 will have increased by 5% on that of year 2. So what do you need to do? Because this is year-on-year growth rate and it does not change. So if I want to determine the sales in year 2, what will I do? I need to multiply it by this rate. I will say 1 plus the rate. 1 is like 100% because we are growing the previous year sales. So it means 100% of last year plus 5% growth. So then how do I do that? If I am here, I will say is equal to the sales of the previous year. So multiply by, I'm opening my bracket, 1 plus, then I will go and click the growth rate, which is C9. What do I need to do? I will put a $sign before C, because I want to copy that. I don't want it to change any time. So I'll put $sign before my column and my row, then I close the bracket. So if I drag down, you will see that the second formula is looking at the same growth rate. So if I copy sideways to the left, you will see my Excel is looking at the same thing, because I have locked C9. I have put $sign before the column and the row, and that is how we go about absolute reference. And I could get my variable cost, because my cost as well varies. It varies with sales. So my computation is complete and very simple, because I know what I need to use. So let's go back and look at the last type of Excel reference. So it's called mix reference. Mix reference. Now, mix reference what do we mean by mixed reference? It is the combination of the relative and the absolute reference. So there are two types of mixed reference cells. One, we have a cell whereby the row is locked while the column changes when you lock only the row while the column changes when the formula is copied downward, sideways, anywhere. So that is what we call a mixed reference, because one is locked, the other is not locked. And we can have the second type where the column is locked while the row changes when the formula is copied sideways, up or down. So where do we use this? We use this in multiplication table, where we want to multiply the number that we are put in a column by the numbers we are put in a row. And again, we use it for trade-off tables. Trade-off table, when you are comparing two things, that if I do 2 of this, I can do 3 of this and all that. We will get to that in the course of our training. Then we majorly use this in financial modeling. People that do financial modeling use it a lot. Let's quickly look at some examples of mixed reference. This is a multiplication table. So this is row 18 and this is column A. So if I want to multiply what I have in this column by what I have in this row, I need to know which one is the row and which one is the column. Like I told us, A is the column where 18 is the row. So I need to lock row when I multiply by the value in this row, and I need to lock the column when I'm multiplying by the value in this column. Let's go about it. So it's equal to, I'm multiplying A19 by B18. Now if I leave it this way and I copy across, you will remember that I said as you copy, Excel copies along as well. So, and we don't want that. So what we need to do is to, because we want to maintain this column even while I'm multiplying across different columns. So it means this column A, I need to lock it. And how do I lock it? I will put $sign before A. I don't need to lock 19 because I need to multiply by A20 when I drag down. I need to multiply by A21 when I drag down. So what I need to lock alone is column, the column here. So for B18, what I need to lock is row 18. I don't need to lock B because I will still go and multiply by the value in column C, and I want Excel to know and change to C when I get to column C. So I will lock only row 18 and I press enter. You could see I got the right value. So if I drag across, you will see it's correct. If I drag down, you will agree with me, it's correct. Let's check this. You could see 5 times 5. So here 4 times 4. Excel has done perfectly because I have locked the right columns. I believe this is very clear, and you can try this in your lecture and try to see how you can work around it. So how do we change? Let's quickly, before we close this topic, let's quickly look at how to toggle cell references. For example, let's say I have a relative reference and I want to change it to to a mixed reference or to an absolute reference. What do I need to do if I don't want to be typing $sign myself? Let's look at A1. If I press F4 key is very close, it's on top of your key 4, your numeric key 4, where you have on the top of your 4. So press F4 once. Once you press F4 once, what happens is that it changes to what we call absolute reference. If I press it the second time, it changes to mixed reference where only the row is locked. If I press it the third time, it changes to a mixed reference where only the column is locked. And if I press it the fourth time, it changes back to the original reference, which is a relative reference. So this is how you can use your F4 key to toggle from one reference to another. And I hope if you practice it, you will see that it's very lovely and it's very interesting. I hope you have learned a